everyone, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, the show where every episode I talk to writers, editors, and agents in the publishing game to learn about them and the work they do, and hopefully how their experiences could help you on your own writing journey. Before I introduce my guest, please take a moment, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. I'll remind you that, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you could also listen on any of the major podcast platforms. Would love to have you share this with a friend if that is something you'd be interested in doing. It's really the best way for endeavors like this one to gain an audience and to share the information that I think, if you're interested at all in writing, you're going to really enjoy today. If you wanted to leave a nice review, that would also be great. That's up to you, but if you do, I greatly appreciate it. So, anyway, let's get on with it because my guests today are a husband and wife team, Anthony Lee Adams and Christina Adams, and they collectively write under the nom de plume of AC Adams. They are longtime veterans of Hollywood with, I would say, a ridiculously long list of incredible credits with many of the major studios, including ABC, CBS, and Disney. They have worked on scores of projects with somebody you may have heard of, Oprah Winfrey. You've probably heard of her. They've produced documentaries for PBS, musicals for the stage, and, well, I guess you get it. They're very, very talented. But with all that, they are here today with me to talk about yet another new project, and that is their new book, their first book. It is called Chasing Shadows, and it is a mystery based on true events related to the disappearance of Christina's father many, many years ago. The book has been called, and I quote, a hair-raising roller coaster thrill ride by Kirkus Reviews, and it has received really a significant number of five-star reviews all over Amazon and Goodreads and other reader sites. So I'm really excited to have them here with me today. So please welcome Anthony and Christina. Welcome to the Open Mic. How are you doing?
We're doing great, and thank you for inviting us.
Oh, yeah, pleased to
Be here
have you
today.
here. Well, so let me get started with, I guess, the basic thing. Christina, as I noted, I understand this book is based on the real disappearance of your father when you were a young woman.
Mhm.
Tell me more about that incident and how it eventually led you and Anthony to write this book.
Well, it actually is inspired by a true life mystery. My father had a secret life that I was unaware of. In fact, none of my siblings. In the book, there's only one sibling, but I have sisters. None of us knew what his history was. And then, very quite unbeknownst to us, he decided to leave. And when we tried to find him, he basically said, "I have a new life, and you're not welcome in my life, and I want nothing to do with you anymore." After being what I would call an amazing father who took us to all the national parks, bought us a horse when we were young so we could play. He taught us how to ski. We'd go hiking. We'd go, fishing. We'd do everything with him. He was a great dad. And a lot of these pressures that we only learned about afterwards were the cause for our parents' dissolution. Our parents got divorced when we were quite young. So we split our time between our father's house and out in the country with the horse and our mother's house. But so the book, it took me obviously when this happened, when my father just disappeared and left us. I was so devastated that it took me decades to just deal with it. Now I'm talking about it unemotionally, but before I would just break into tears and it would be a whole thing. But I finally started looking at him like a human being instead of a father. And once I did that, and once Anthony and I discovered a lot of his history, I found a lot of compassion for him, and I found him to be a very interesting character. And so we decided that it would make a great novel. And it was because it was complex with the history of my mother, the history of my father, the daughter's search for her father. We decided the best medium for it would be a novel because we could get deeply into each character.
It was especially shocking, his disappearance, because he was a well-respected professor of history at the University of San Diego. He was a well-known scholar with a lot of published papers, and he was one of those incredibly, responsible and cultured people. So for him, out of the blue, to disappear and tell his kids, "I have a new life and can never want to see you again. Don't look for me," was pretty shocking.
And it was absolutely tempting to the point where I had to know. I had to find out. And my sisters both had children, and so I was the only one that was free to do the digging, and I decided to be the one to start digging. And as we uncovered some of his secrets, it became more and more interesting, more and more devastating, and then we realized we'd hit a brick wall, and there were no 100%
We
answers.
started close to home, going to the university, talking to his protege, people that he knew, friends. And then that led us to trying to get his military records, trying to get everything that we could in terms of genealogy about him. And the more we learned, the more that various unusual clues would come up. And our search ended up taking us to looking at his published works also for clues. Took us to Montreal, took us to Boston, and to extensive trips to Ireland and Italy
Italy.
before we had enough material to write the novel.
I'm curious, the song, well, I'm just a little backstory here, just very quickly. I was in my late 40s when I learned the person I thought was my father was not actually not my father. And I found, good old 23andMe, right? That's how I discovered who my actual father was. And kind of the same thing in a way. I was able to develop a kind of a quasi relationship with a woman who turned out to be my niece, but the rest of his family wanted nothing to do with me, wouldn't talk to me, nothing. And so, as you're talking about your situation, I only tell that story because as you were talking about, it, I was thinking, wow, I wonder how you mentioned, how devastating it was, which I absolutely can understand. How did the emotional aspect of all of this play out for you as you were doing all of this research and learning all of this stuff and then writing a story, fictionalizing to whatever extent, but knowing that it was based on all these things that had this big impact on you? I'm just really curious about how that emotional end of it played into all of this process for you creating this book.
Well, I think part of it, of course, is time. This happened when I was in my 20s, and I'm not in my 20s. So the time of being able to process it and kind of being able to have that distance between the actual when it happened and today made it easier. And once we had done our research, and I mean, we interviewed people that said they'd been sworn to secrecy for the rest of their life, that belonged to this. Just to give you a little backstory, which we didn't know. Okay, what we discovered was that my father had been a priest when he met my mother. Just as in the book, my parents fell in love in Italy, in Rome, when my father was stationed at the Vatican. He was living there. And it was shortly after World War II. And so they fell in love, and he left with my mother. And when they came back to the United States to his family, he was soundly rejected because he was from an Irish Catholic family, and he was supposed to be a priest. And he wasn't just a priest, any ordinary priest, which is what it's one of the clues that started was, well, if he was an ordinary priest and he left the priesthood, no big deal. It happens, right? But the difference in our situation was he didn't just leave the priesthood, he left a kind of covert group called, I can't give you the name because we fictionalized it, but a covert order within the Catholic Church, kind of on the outskirts of it, but tied to it. And they pursued him. But he came to San Diego and they pursued him until he left my mother and divorced her.
And went back into the group. Also, when Christina's mother met her father to be in Rome, uh, her family had been bombed in Sicily, and they were forced to flee to Rome, which was considered an open city at that time. And when she met Christina's father, he didn't wear, the group that he belonged to did not wear any clerical identification. They
She
wore
didn't
business
know he was a
suits.
priest.
Oh,
And she,
wow.
so there was a lot of secrets. It's like with your family, a lot of layers of secrets, and we kept peeling off the layers and finding more and more. And there's a lot of scenes in the book that were inspired by Anthony and my search, people we asked to interview who resisted us and kicked us out of the place, and just, so we had a lot. Finally, when we realized that we there was no uncovering all of it. It was impossible to unwind all the secrets. We decided that we would let it go. And then years passed, as I said, and I became more and more interested in him as a human being, not as a father. When you attach your emotions to a person and they're your father, it's one relationship. When you look at them with that distance, with that perspective of this isn't just my father, this was a man who went through being rejected by his family, being rejected by the church, being rejected by being pursued by and told, here is your higher calling, et cetera, et cetera. We realized this was a man that was very torn. And what was fascinating to me as just studying him as a person, he was super brilliant. He had multiple PhDs. I used to go to his classes at the university here and sit in his classroom and listen to him. He spoke multiple languages. Um, so he was so smart, and I kept thinking, how could he be so twisted and by his emotions? And then I realized that the emotions always win out over intelligence, always. And so we started understanding him as a person, and he became more and more interesting. And we decided we needed to write a novel about this girl's search, this girl's pursuit of him, this young girl's finding him, how the confrontation, and of course, how they reconciled ultimately in an odd way, but they did.
And over the years, the revelations would come in at different times, which would change our perspective on the story. For instance, his obituary arrived with his will, basically stating that he had never been married, never had kids. His tombstone said forever a priest. And we didn't have any idea who his family was at all. And Christina
Called.
was able to, from the obituary, see this picture of the all the various priests and who was
Well,
giving
their
the
names were listed
yeah, the eulogy. Christina managed to get them on the phone, and including the canon lawyer who arranged for the divorce,
of
and
our parents.
told Christina that in the eyes of the church, he was never married and never had any children.
This is also fascinating to me. Um, you know, you guys have worked together for a very long time, and I'm curious about the writing process when you write together. Anytime husbands and wives write together, or writing things, I've had several on the show, and there's always these ups and downs, but this is the story unto itself. This is like Dan Brown on steroids kind of a thing. How is the process for you working together on this? Because Christina, this was obviously your story in so many ways, very personal to you. But of course, then when you're coming at it again many years later, um, was it difficult to work on this as a team? Did you ever find yourself wanting to pull away from it because it was maybe a little tough on you? Or I'm
I
just curious
actually,
about how
I actually,
you
yeah,
guys
it's
did all
true. I,
that.
I actually initially didn't want to do it because it felt too personal. But Anthony was on the journey. He was all in. He went with me on all of my searches. We had just met when this happened with my father. We were both in our 20s, and he said, "Let's do it. He was all in. Let's figure out what really happened. Let's find him." Um, so he felt like the perfect person to tell this story with, number one, because he was intimately involved from the beginning. And our process has been, we've worked together for so long that we basically can read each other's minds. And our process is pretty seamless. We tend to outline the structure of the story together. And then we basically break it up into chapters or segments that we then each go at separately. And then we swap each other's work, and I rewrite him and he rewrites me. And then we just keep rewriting until both of us are 100% satisfied. And the goal is that the work is always paramount. We're always going to put the work first. I come up with a line he doesn't like, I have to just say, okay, we got to come up with a better one, vice versa. So we try to check our egos at the door and not care who wrote what and just keep working on it. And we've found that 100% of the time, if he doesn't like something or I don't like something, the third thing that comes out is better than either one of us
We
came up
reject,
with.
if we both don't like it, we reject it and come up with something that we both do like.
And it's usually better,
It's
always.
it's the Quincy Jones thing. I'm sure you've probably heard this story about, when they recorded We Are the World, he had the big sign over the studio entrance, the door leading to the studio said, check your ego here, so everyone could collaborate effectively. So that sounds like a great process. And, I know it's not easy, it's never easy working with a partner, but, to be able to meld all that stuff and have such a collaborative process, it's really an admirable thing. I'm also curious too, your father's story sounds, like I said, like something Dan Brown could have written, but real. It's like these things, so much of what you're describing are things that were real in his life. How much do you feel like in the end you actually had to fictionalize? And number one, and number two, were there ever things you discovered that didn't make it into the story, or you felt that's just, like a bridge too far? That's too big. No one will even believe that. That's so crazy, kind of a thing. Did you have any of those?
Well, the whole framework of the story is based on reality. His disappearance. He is a college professor, just like it is in the story. The family life at the ranch and all of that. So that's all. And then our search is really embedded. So many of the scenes of our actual search, we've changed the names of where they took place and the people we met, but so many of those are right out of our actual search. But what we found out was the organization that he was a part of is very real. It's over 800 years old. We didn't, and there's only so much we could ever find out. We would never really untie the complete Gordian knot. We learned some very intriguing things that he uh, supposedly did, but rather than try to go with things we could never know, we said, look, let's go with the dramatic truth of this story and his fascinating and enigmatic nature, and let's bring dramatic truth to that story. So when we sat down to outline, we were starting with the basic framework of life, of what reality had brought us, and then we worked our way through the story and brought fiction to be involved to make it work as if we had the information, all the real information. Uh, so it came to us very, very easily. It came to us. It's almost as if we were channeling where this story needed to go. The story started, the characters, a lot of new characters that we invented, they started speaking to us. The story kind of came alive. And by the time we had a 62 chapter structure that covers a 70-year time frame from 3 points of view, the whole story and all the scenes, it felt like we had finally found the story, and the story that needed to be told came to us.
And we had to fictionalize a lot, as I mentioned earlier, that we had a lot of doors slammed in our face. People said, there's no, I can't tell you anything. We interviewed priests that said nobody knows about them but the group. And so
Hmm.
we did have to fictionalize a decent amount, but the shape and I think the dramatic truth of the story is ultimately, like Anthony said, we found that the heart. That's the story we wanted to tell.
As an example, in reality, we discovered that in this group, he spent a year in solitude. You're never able to fully understand the exact
What
nature
that
of what that.
was.
However, in our fictionalized version, he does go into the solitude as we imagined it. So,
Yeah.
we had to use our imaginations to fill in the missing pieces.
Well, that's a process um, thing, and I wanted to ask you a process question here too, because you also write in the novel, it contains three different perspectives from your protagonist, Sophia, and then
Hmm.
also her father and mother. And I think a lot of writers struggle to find even one authentic voice, especially in a first novel. Now, granted, this was not your first creative project, but how was that process for you to have three distinct voices to write, to curate and to create as you went along in this novel process?
It was wonderful because we felt like there was no way to tell it 100% from Sophia's point of view, because the father had a lot of secrets, a lot of which she never learned. And so as she learned things, we learned things, meaning the reader. And and then the same thing with the mother. We kind of had to get into their history to understand them as human beings, as people, their emotional components, the reason the mother was so shut down, why did she feel the need to lie? We all of these things. Why did he feel the need to lie? What was his history? So we really felt excited to tell the story from three different perspectives. It's still primarily Sophia's perspective, but we had to dip into those characters too to understand their psyches.
And as part of our journey with this story, Christina's mother had a tremendous amount of secrets herself that she never revealed. And as we would find out things on our journey, Christina and her mother got closer and closer, and we started to learn a lot about her father from things that the mother would now reveal. And so she was a very vivid and amazing character and had an incredible past herself. And so we were able to delve into her secrets, which were interlocked with his secrets. And so those characters, we knew their voices so well that they really started speaking through us.
You know, it's interesting to me because I think any creative project from beginning to end, if you're a creative person, I think they're one of the unique aspects I think of being a creative person is that when you get involved in these projects and you see them through to the end, there is yeah, there's a satisfaction, of course, but I this is going to sound cliche and I hope it doesn't or hokey, but I think each one of these things evolves us or changes us a little bit. And I think it's one of the joys of being a creative person is you have these things that, that come into your life. They are a little bit like your children or whatever, and they grow you a little bit. And, listening to you talk about this one and just what you were just saying, about Christina's mom and the things you learned there, this seems like an incredible journey of discovery that you could have done as a nonfiction if you'd wanted to. You chose to do it this way. It was, for the storytelling aspects of it. When you got to the end of it, and then, it's just came out in April, so it's not like you're at the end. But I mean, when you finished it and okay, this is now going to go out into the world. How, how was this different from other projects that you've done? I mean, how was that feeling for you? That feeling of again, you've birthed this creative project, but this is a very personal one. How was that for you?
Well, for me, it was very cathartic. It was an experience that actually was good for me because a lot of these things I didn't talk to other people about. Um, a few of our friends knew a little bit about it, but as friends have read the book, they go, "Oh my God, I had no idea." So it felt like almost an unburdening and an actual it was a realization for me as well as the characters as I think as I discovered things they discovered things and then I kind of it was almost a marriage between us and the characters, if you know what I mean. There was like this melding of emotions between my own emotional state, characters' emotional states. The whole experience was very rich, very cathartic. And I think I'm glad to be able to tell this story
It,
because I feel like sometimes we all have secrets. And truth to me is of primary importance. And I think that we have to question everything in our lives. And I think too often people just kind of bury it. They put it in the back, the back corners of their mind, and they don't bring it forward. But ultimately, those things still come out. Whether you bring them forward or don't bring them forward, they affect your life in different ways. So for me, it was good. It was like opening the closet doors and saying, okay, this is how I felt about this experience.
And this particular project was liberating in a number of ways. One is that we'd spent so many years as songwriters, as screenwriters, and so forth, to be able to paint a canvas as big as we did and to be able to delve into the deep backstories as we did would be impossible in a screenplay. But to have a canvas rich enough and also that we could go into the inner worlds and thoughts and feelings and souls of the characters, you have to be much more circumspect with that in screenwriting, was extremely satisfying to get the extra depth and three-dimensionality of novel writing. And it was extremely addicting. So
It was,
we
we're
won't
going to
need
do it
to roll.
again.
Yeah.
We
Well,
love
okay,
doing it.
so that begs two questions. The first one, of course, is this seems like it works perfectly well as a standalone, but is there an avenue by which this we might see sequels or, even a number of sequels
We have
based on
already
what you've
envisioned
got?
a sequel. Without any spoilers, the book does end with a cliffhanger. And we felt because we did a lot of research, so we still have a lot of information that we wanted to share and, get out in a novel form. And we have envisioned a sequel. So that's our next book.
Fabulous. Well, the second question, of course, your history, as I noted, is so deeply ingrained in Hollywood and as you noted, screenwriting and production. This just screams like something for the big screen or streaming something. Have you given that any thought? Is that I know
Yes,
every writer wants to see their novel turned into a movie or a TV series, but I mean, you guys actually have worked in this industry for a long time. What's the thought there on whether we might see this on a screen
We
sometime?
were always aware of trying to write it cinematically. And so they're the 62 very taut chapters that all turn the story. This is just, and making it very cinematic visually. So we kind of brought the energy of a movie to the novel. And we thought we struck the right balance there. And so we're really excited about the limited series format that would allow this to open up into a number of episodes. So that's definitely what we envision for it. We think it would make a terrific limited series.
Well, Netflix, are you listening? Because I have a suggestion for you if um, as I've noted here multiple times, you've long history working in film and TV production, theater, music. This was your first novel. How do you feel about the experience you've had in the publishing industry, as it maybe compares to all your other experiences in these creative endeavors?
well, we enjoyed it a lot from a creative perspective. It was fantastic. From a publishing perspective, it was pretty smooth. I mean, I think one of the things that I like about publishing novels as opposed to it's less collaborative in a way. You have to answer to a lot of people when you're working in television. And so with this one, we wrote it just the way we wanted to write it. We didn't have any notes other than each other's notes. And we were able to find a publisher that was really supportive, was a small publisher, and we had a great experience with them.
They're terrific to work with.
Yeah.
Acorn Publishing, they're formed and run by artists, by novelists. So we had wonderful collaborative experience doing it. And also just the fact that in the writing, anything we could envision in the novel, we could do. Always with screenplays, we were thinking budget. You know, here, if we, what happens in the catacombs in Rome and some of these really in the battles in World War II and the bombing of Sicily and all of these things. We could just make that as real as possible and with no budgetary considerations, which was really fun.
Oh, the bugaboo of the dollar. We all know that.
Right.
Um, well, I've only got one more here for you, but I cannot let you go um, without talking about a different project you have, a new theatrical project, because I loved this movie, Sideways the Musical. which you're developing as a Broadway musical. I have to hear more about this. Please tell me a little bit about Sideways the musical.
Well, this has been another really fun collaboration. My college buddy, Rex Pickett, wrote the novel Sideways that the Alexander Payne Oscar-winning movie was based on. And Rex was aware of my music and musicals from the very beginning. And he called me on the phone one day and said, "Hey, um, I'm putting this on as a play." And this was in LA at a little theater called Ruskin Theater in Santa Monica. Come check out the play. So we went and we saw it. And it was hilarious. And it translated beautifully to the new idiom. And he said, "Well, what do you think the next step is?" I said, "A musical." It was absolutely perfect for a musical comedy.
Mhm.
Uh, so then he said, "Let's collaborate." And so we went through the process of converting the and expanding the play into a musical, adding scenes, adding characters. In fact, taking the female characters and making them as prominent, the two main female characters, as the male characters. So that opened up some fresh avenues for the piece. And then we recorded the entire soundtrack at our studio and brought in really great Broadway singers for that. And it was very gratifying that Broadway Records, one of the biggest labels in the world for Broadway soundtracks, released it. It's doing very well in terms of we get a lot of global play out of it, getting radio play out of it. So now the next step is to mount it on stage, and we are working with producers in New York to go through the process. So it's still on its path towards the stage.
And Anthony wrote some amazing music. It's really, really good. It's fun.
You have to tell me there's a song about not drinking any Merlot.
There is.
There is. Can we say four-letter words on your show?
You can, yes, yes.
The song is named No Fucking Merlot.
I love that. I absolutely love. That's why I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I love the movie. I thought it was great. I've been to. My wife and I are, we like wine, so we've been wine tasting and the whole area there, and went to the Wagon Wheel, like I guess now as a pilgrimage that you do when you're down in that part of the world. But I also like. I mean, when you see Almost Famous and The Color Purple and some of these other things turned into broad, stage musicals, it really does give you an appreciation for how layered and how textured a creative thing can be. If the storytelling is good, music can augment it in a way that almost nothing else can. And so
Agreed.
I hope it happens, and I hope someday it comes through Northern California so I can go see it because I think that would be great.
Yeah, it's incredible how music reaches right into the heart and can speak to you emotionally in a way that even the most exalted words could never do by themselves. And
Absolutely. My wife and I were in Santa Barbara last December, I guess. We went to see the Million Dollar Quartet at a theater there and just really enjoyed it. I love the stage. I love the theater. Those are things that are really favorites of mine. So like I say, I had to ask you about that when I saw that because I said that's perfect. I'm so glad to hear that you've written some new songs and everything for it too.
and so that album's available on Amazon, Spotify, Apple, everywhere. The soundtrack album.
And
Alrighty then.
you
Well,
can
that
send
is
me
good
the
info
link.
for me and for everybody else out there. Is just if you want to, especially if you want to hear a song called, I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. I'm down with that. Well, I always like to close with what I hope is a fun question. I certainly mean for it to be a fun question, and you guys can work on this one collaboratively. I always like to give you three options here. And let's just say I'm omniscient enough that I can put you together with one of these three people for whatever you want, dinner, drinks, conversation. But you can only choose one of the three. And the options that I'm going to give you are the late, great Bob Fosse. I guess they're all late here. Bob Fosse, the great, very successful choreographer, the legendary Vivian Leigh or another Leigh, the great, I guess, I almost said single novelist, but I guess she did eventually have the follow-up, Harper Lee. We all know from, um,
Oh, sorry.
why am I going brain dead Har
Oh, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Paul Mockingbird? Man, Getting old is not for wimps, let me tell you. My memory things. Anyway, those are your options: Harper Lee, Vivian Leigh, or Bob Fosse. If I could put you together with one of them to have a nice long conversation, who would you choose and why?
Well,
Well,
you take it.
I would, with those three, I would have to go Fosse just because of getting the theater legendary stories. They would all be great. But then the other choice I would go for that wasn't on the list is Mark Twain.
Oh yeah, yes,
Yeah, I would love to go to lunch with Mark Twain.
yes. Here, I'm a political reporter by trade, and I, my publication, we cover the California State Capitol, and we just had the annual frog jumping contest
Oh,
here, where all the lawmakers get their frogs, and they have the big contest. I can't remember who won, but I think the winning frog jumped about 18 feet or something like that. So it's a big deal here every year. It draws tons of
That's funny.
observers and media and everything. So it's a yes. Mark Twain is a irrefutable legend around Sacramento. So well, guys, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. If you haven't seen the book, again, it's under the nom de plume of AC Adams, Anthony and Christina Adams. Looking forward to seeing it. Looking forward to seeing Sideways the musical at some point. I wish you all the luck with all this. Again, I really appreciate you guys coming on the show today.
thanks so much, Richard.
We
Really
enjoyed
appreciate it.
it.
It was great.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I'm gonna remind you guys once again out there, if you like this, please share it with a friend. Let people know. Let them hear a little bit about the insights that they've shared here with us today. Again, especially if you know somebody who's getting into and getting interested in writing or any kind of creativity. This is why I do this. I don't do it to make money. You notice you don't see any ads. That's because I don't want to. So please share it. That's the only thing I ask. The other thing I ask for all of you is just please remember tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So please, whatever you do, make today count. Until then, for my guests, Anthony and Christina Adams, this has been the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words. And I will be back in 2 weeks with a new show. Take care.